Well, hi, and welcome to Sumatra on Bass. Hope you're well. Today I wanted to cover off on a topic that we all struggle with from time to time, or we come across it when we start playing out particularly, and that is amplifier placement. So today I'm using the humble Rumble 25 Fender combo with the 8-inch speaker. It doesn't really matter for the exercise how big the amplifier is, but when you're practicing at home and you set the EQ on your amp to give you a pleasing tone to your ears, it's all good. You've got soft furnishings around, the room is not that big, doesn't really interact that much with what's coming out of the amplifier. When you move all that to a stage and a big room, all these frequencies that might be present in the room, like the excitable frequencies, particularly the low frequencies for bass players, come into play. So you have the situation where you're, it sounds good to you where you're standing next to your amp or in front of your amp. On the opposite end of the stage, the guitar player will be saying to you, hey, your bass sounds really boomy. And that's generally because those low frequencies will go around the back of the stage and follow the walls and go to where your guitar player is standing, for example, and then he's hearing the added bass of the stage area, the room, so to speak. So when the amp is sitting on the ground like this, it's coupled to the floor, and you'll get a lot more bottom end out of it than you would if it was, say, sitting on a stand. So this causes a few problems. One of them is the boominess on stage. The other one is if you're playing from your amp to the room, in other words, you don't have front of house support, generally it's probably not a bad position to keep it in. You may want to angle it a little so the guitar player can get some of the highs, which are more directional. But when you get to plug in to the front of house, then this essentially becomes a stage monitor. And then your sound engineer out the front is competing with whatever's happening on stage. And you get the situation where you're playing, but the engineer will tell you it's too loud or it's too boomy, but you're hearing it okay, and you're saying, well, no, it's not really that loud up here. But you got to imagine low frequency waves are quite long, and they take time to develop. So out there it could sound a lot louder and a lot thicker than what you're experiencing here. So in those situations, and I use a small amp, similar to this, similar in size, as a stage monitor. So I'll face it on the side of the stage towards me, and typically what I do is use something to put under the front and just tip it back, just tilt it back a bit. So I'm going to turn off my lapel mic and just play with it on the floor, and then I'm going to tilt it back because there's a microphone sitting next to the camera at sort of ear level where your listeners will be listening, and this room is not entirely huge or anything, but it will illustrate the point. So, and we'll hear it sitting like that and then tilt it back. So you can hear there that when I tilt it back, I can actually hear it a lot clearer at that angle. And out there, the bottom end drops off, so it's not boomy in the room. And essentially, you want to find the balance between a good sound through front of house, where your audience is, and a workable sound on stage, so that you're responding to a good sound, a reasonably good sound on stage. And this varies from room to room depending where you go. So there's no hard and fast rules, but experimenting with positioning of all the amplifiers on stage is critical to achieving a nice balance between yourselves and a nice sound in the room. And if you have a sound engineer and you're going through front of house, then it's good to work together to try and achieve those goals. The other thing that you can do is to borrow a drum case or a Rode case or something and actually try and lift the amp up to ear level. Luckily, the Rumble is a very light little unit, so if I've got that sitting up here, I can definitely hear it very, very well. Now let's just have a listen what it sounds like out there to the camera microphone. So you can see now that bottom end has kind of rolled off even more out there. And this is what you want to achieve, is again to not have a muddy sound out the front, because where you're standing it might sound nice and punchy and you're playing all this intricate stuff on your bass, but the audience is just hearing a muffled rumble, and none of that's translating to the sound. So doing stuff like that and positioning your amp becomes very, very important. So I hope that this microphone is picking up the differences of the different positions so that you can actually compare and hear what doing all these different things does. Now, for many, many, many years, I've played through various big amps on stage. I suppose in the early days with my band, we needed some serious power, 500, 700 watt amplifier for the bass, you know, to compete with 100 watt guitar amps, acoustic drum kits. And that does sometimes become like the softest thing on the stage really is going to be the drum set, and there's only a limit to how soft the drummer can play before you lose all the dynamic and feel. So you turn up your amp typically to match his level, and the guitar does the same, keyboards or whatever else, and vocals. And that can sometimes add up to a big loud sound in a smaller environment. So, but you can't really go below it without losing something. So over the years we've gradually switched to playing through the front of house. So we got a better front of house that can handle the band. Our drummer switched to an electronic drum kit, and slowly but surely all the amplifiers on stage disappeared and everybody's gone with in-ear monitors. So what that does is allows your engineer to get a beautiful mix at the front of house without it being loud, because now everything on stage is controllable from 0 up. And if we do use a monitor, it will be 1 or 2 monitors just for the vocalists to hear a little bit of themselves and the band on the stage. So that gives the engineer total control over what the audience is hearing. And we get a lot of compliments now on how clear the sound is and how you can hear every instrument and how the bass is, it comes through without being muddy. It can be thick, it can be molasses thick, sort of reggae bottom end, but it's not muddy. So that's where you get that extra control by going the in-ear monitor route. And it's not for everyone. If I were playing in a small bar, I would use a little amp on the floor, give it enough volume and enough bottom that it sounds good in the room, and then position myself so I can hear what I want to hear. A little bit of a compromise, but it actually works. And if you're going direct like that, if you're going through the front of house, position it so you get a monitor so you can hear yourself the way you want, and try and interfere as little as you can with the front of house. So typically now my setup with some places is a small amp, which is my monitor. It goes on my left side facing up towards my head. It's probably at a very low practice volume, and then we have monitors around the stage where drums and everything else comes through so you can hear, but the level is low, which is also good because it protects your hearing. Out the front it's a lot louder. With the in-ear monitors, everybody has their own individual mix, and the stage is essentially silent, so the front of house has a much better chance of achieving a good sound and a good balance at a much lower volume. So then you'll find anytime you put your amp on the floor, anytime you put your amp on the floor in a corner, it kind of picks up a bass boost. That's very, very handy if you've got a small amp and you're trying to get more bottom end out of it at some gigs. If you're finding that it's muddy, move it away from the wall, the back wall, the side wall, try and get it up off the floor, and you'll get a much clearer sound. So I hope this little tip helps you in your quest to achieve a nice balance of sound for the audience and for yourselves on stage. As ever, thanks very much for spending this time with me. Keep making music, keep playing bass, keep having fun, look after yourselves, and I'll see you very, very soon. Stay well.